And this is the second interview in my Future of America interview series. And today I am speaking to Blake Patton. And thank you, Blake, for joining me tonight. And pleasure to have you here and look forward to the conversation.
Pleasure to be here.
And well, the whole antithesis of this interview series is to talk to millennials who are engaged in the political process, have opinions, and basically know what's going on. And with everything that we just are seeing with the first 2 weeks in the Trump administration and the election that just passed, what are your thoughts about where the country is right now?
Well, I think that we're at a place where the country is they're disappointed with what was given to them by uh, the I guess the establishment on the left side of the spectrum. I think they're very disappointed and they feel like they were sold a bill of goods and they weren't delivered on. And I think they're now saying, well, if they didn't give us what we want, we're going to go over here and see what they can give us and see if they do what we want. And I think that's where we are as a country right now.
Well, with that being said, it's President Trump at his inauguration had the lowest approval rating of any president up to now. I believe it was around hovering between 37 and 40% at his inauguration. So it doesn't seem like the country is overwhelmingly supportive of him. As you said, it does seem like there was just a lot of discontent from voters, and many of which I spoke to over a 6-month period with Hillary Clinton and well, especially her as an establishment figure from the left. But when given her against Trump, even though she won by nearly 3 million votes in the popular vote, it still wasn't enough for her to carry important states in the Rust Belt to win the Electoral College. And so with this steaming unpopularity we're seeing from directed towards President Trump, it seems like every single day he's been president, there's been some form of major protest. Do you feel that this is something that's going to continue throughout at least his 4 years of president?
It's tough to say because, we are at the very, very beginning. The geopolitical climate can change over the course of 4 years. So it's really tough to say what's going to happen. But I do think that if we see very controversial things like the executive order on the travel ban or things like that, I do think you will see a lot of clash against it, and it will be a statement that just because Trump is the president and the Republicans do control Congress, the left still does wield a lot of power. It's just they need to be able to not be afraid to express their power and how to use it.
Well, that seems to be a bit of an issue when it comes to a lot of the establishment corporatist Democrats in the party. They don't seem to want to fight. But when you see from the Republican side, anything that gets brought up, they're willing to fight, no matter if it's popular or not with the American people. And that seems to be something, as you mentioned, directly with the travel ban. We've seen protests all over the country at various airports, and even the federal courts have said this law, we need to put a temporary stop to it so we can actually even see if it's legal. And President Trump is basically saying, I'm going to ignore the federal courts and continue forward with it. So which people can already say that, make the argument that that's an impeachable offense. And it seems that there is so much going on right now, because even earlier in the night, he announced his Supreme Court nomination. And with everything happening at once, do you think there's going to be fatigue for coming from the left, especially those activists in the streets? Or do you feel that the Democratic Party itself, minus a few figures, are going to be willing to put up a fight throughout this administration? Or what do you feel is going to end up happening?
Well, I would like to see the left do more of what they have been doing. That um, they've actually mobilized and actually gone out and did something about these policies that they don't agree with. And I would like to see more of that. But sadly, um, I think that over time you do get I guess battle fatigue of some sort. You continue on, and it's going to get to a point where people are just going to get tired of it. And I sadly I think that's a very it's a large vulnerability to the left, and it's always been that way.
And yeah, I mean, I guess that's why certain groups like our Revolution Justice Democrats have begun literally over the past couple of months to try to continue a concerted effort and push forward and push back against these policies and try to get better candidates that will actually be able to defeat um, more conservative candidates for Congress and the House and the state legislature level as well. But going into you just a bit, like you're a millennial and in your early 20s, and what got you interested in politics in the first place? Is something that happened in when you were in high school, or was it a class, or how did that happen?
For me, I would say that it was I guess just looking around at what was going on and just observing the way that our Congress was absolutely deadlocked. And we had a Congress which was decidedly Republican, even though the Democrats held a slim majority in the Senate. And then you had President Obama, who was the executive, and of course, you have a divided government, and it makes for very interesting things, and it makes you question like what can be done about this. And I also think books about political philosophy really it gets you into the whole topic of politics, and it really helps you to understand um, power politics and the way things are done and why they're done that way.
How old were you when you first started reading and paying attention to Congress?
I would say it was about starting high school. That was that was so long ago now at this point, like almost 6 years, I think. And it's something that, when you see it going on, you realize that there are pretty big problems. Um, like I am my generation, millennials. We are the generation to really experience uh, firsthand the effects of the crash in 2008, 2009. And we feel that after the crash, the government should have done something to really rectify the mistakes that were made. And nothing was ever done. The Obama said that he would jail the people who broke the law. He didn't. And Congress didn't pass any legislation to hold the Wall Street accountable, and it seemed to go by the wayside.
Yeah, they thought they did, but they refused to bring back Glass-Steagall, which Bill Clinton got rid of in his administration. So yeah, there's people on the left and right will say, well, people on the left will say the current regulation on Wall Street is enough. People on the right will say it's too much, and with Trump's administration might get rid of it. But yeah, if Glass-Steagall was re-implemented, we would be protected. But unfortunately, that might not be the case for quite some time. And when speaking to other people, and other individuals around your age, other millennials, do you feel they are interested enough in politics, or do you feel they realize how these policies do affect them directly and can have a direct impact on their life, or do you feel that there's definitely room for improvement there.
I think in some ways, I know this sounds weird, but I think there is a mix of all three, really. You know, there are some who are very deeply interested in it. There are some who, you know, have maybe less of, more or less a disinterest. And then you have the people who, who would probably be, I guess, half concerned, half not concerned, Um, and I think that there's a serious problem because the next generation, I think, because of the failures of the left, the failures that the left really, like, they didn't decide to capitalize on when they had the chance, when they were in power. I think as a result of that, the next generation is going to be more conservative, I think.
I'm not sure if the country is moving in that direction with, because right now, if you look at all the polls, more progressive values or policies are liked by the country. It's just
Well, conservative as in supporting the not necessarily like full on right wing, like the evangelical shit like that, but more talking like I guess you could say like I guess more in the sense of the classical Republicans, of the '60s, I think. They're going in that direction instead of like the direction of like the classical Democrats of like FDR and whatnot. I think that in some ways they are going back in that way.
yeah, I guess it would depend on the groups of people we are speaking of, because from the interactions I've seen, is even if they aren't, we'll say, politically astute and know exactly what different policies represent and what they mean, a lot of individuals seem to be favoring more policies that would be like from FDR, a social democrat, other than what we would see as a neoliberal policy that would be from some liberals and moderate Republicans, and actually conservative Republicans. Almost the entire right takes on neoliberal, neoconservative principles, especially when we're talking about war and the economy. So, what specific individuals are you speaking on? More younger individuals you've noticed that are moving to the right, or
I'm looking at people who are growing up, like in the post-Obama, like in the post-Obama, post-divided government world. I think that the generation after mine, the generation, I guess it's Generation Y. I think that they are. I think in some ways they are going to pick up on more of a conservative attitude towards certain things, not on all issues, but I think on some issues they will be slightly more identifying as conservative than on the other side of the spectrum.
yeah, that's definitely something to look forward, or not look forward to, but to look forward to see if there becomes to be that divide with younger voters, because there's definitely a lot of room for either side to pick up voters, and that's why we're seeing movements on the left and the right to capitalize on and getting younger voters in. There's still a lot of issues the right has with attracting Hispanic voters, Black voters, and they're losing ground among white voters as well. But as you see with the left, they're not doing enough to get away from corporate entities to attract a lot of young. Well, the Democratic Party itself isn't doing that. So that's kind of what got us to having President Donald Trump. So there is definitely, especially on national level, room for something like that to happen. And moving to certain social issues going on right now, you're an openly gay man, and a lot of individuals in the from the LGBT community I've seen some are terrified about Trump's presidency and what he could do, even though he has recently came out and said, like, I was the first Republican president to speak openly about the LGBT community in an inaugural address. So why I don't see why they would be afraid of me. But how do you feel, and speaking to others in the community, how do you feel their reaction is to a Trump presidency and what he possibly could do?
See, I have a very mixed perspective on the issue. I personally am not really all that afraid about Trump on the issue of LGBT stuff. I don't necessarily I don't think he's as big of a threat as people make him out to be on that issue. I think that personally, I don't think he gives two shits about the issue. I think it's an issue to him that he pandered to the religious, to try and get their votes. And I mean, he does need their votes because they are a key demographic to, Republicans winning the White House. That's just a fact. You have to pick up the religious voters. But when I really look at him, I'm not necessarily that afraid. I'm more concerned with like the actual the religious the more religious evangelicals in the Congress than I am with Trump as the president, more than anything else.
Does that concern move to Mike Pence, who has actually tried to implement some draconian, what is called gay conversion therapies and things like that? Are you more worried about him having an influence, or do you feel that Trump has other concerns that he would address far quicker than certain laws like gay conversion therapy and gay marriage and things like that?
I think Trump is he's more economic driven on his policies. I think a lot of his campaign was driven on economic issues, and I think that when it boils down to social issues, I think it's way down the list of his agenda. So I don't necessarily think it's really on the top of his to-do list. I think trade deals and that stuff is much more higher up on the agenda for him as far as stuff that he wants to accomplish.
So even with Steve Bannon being his chief strategist, you don't feel, even with his influence and the influence of Pence, you don't feel that he's really going to act quickly on that?
No, I mean, I looked at, I've seen the history, behind Trump and some of his statements on, LGBT stuff and LGBT issues, and he's really not really taken much of a firm stance either way. And I think that, I don't necessarily think that he cares so much. I think it's really like not as much of an issue for him. And it's kind of like, oh, I don't really give a fuck. Like, who cares? Fuck off.
Do you from others that you've spoken to in the LGBT community, do you feel that they are concerned, or is it just most people are waiting to see if he does anything?
I think some are concerned, and then some are, checking, just waiting to see what he does on the issues, and really just making sure to, not necessarily jump the gun on the issue. There are some people who do want to really wait and see what exactly he does, because, it only has been like a week of his presidency, and we don't really, or actually it would be almost 2 weeks at this point. And we don't really know where he's going with that issue. He hasn't really come anywhere close to that issue.
Yes, and none of his executive orders, which are presidential memorandums, where there's already quite a few of them, surprisingly this quickly. No, he has not addressed the issue at all. His Supreme Court nominee, he says he is in favor of precedent. So if he's at his word there, he's not going to ever vote against marriage equality, since that was set a precedent that was just set by the Supreme Court. So there are individuals like the Shafleys. They came out and are trying to push him more conservative, and so it's to see that on that issue, there is going to be a waiting game. I do believe as well, and just speaking about his executive orders and what he is pushing forward, again, and as a young person in the country, do you feel that if these go without stringent challenges from the left or even some from the right, do you feel that younger millennials, are going to break into politics thinking these things are actually legal and this is how government should be run? Or do you feel that millennials are more intelligent and will understand that he's kind of overstepping?
Well, I'm not really sure because we're kind of living in a moment that we've never really been in before. This is something that we're not, we haven't really experienced anything like this before. So it's really tough to say because there's really nothing comparable. I do think that younger people are probably going to get more politically engaged, more politically active. I think I would encourage younger people, if they really want to get their feet wet, I would encourage them to not just vote, but I would also encourage them to get involved in local area and state politics. Federal. There's more than just federal. State is arguably just as important as federal. And I think that more young people. I think young people. I think there's a misconception that federal is the end all be all, and I think that we need to send the message that yes, federal is very, very important, but it's not the end all be all. There's a lot to be decided in the states.
And locally, he's speaking locally now, and you are from Texas, and I've read a lot of interesting things coming from the demographics in Texas, that it's moving further to the left. Are you seeing that currently? Are you seeing as potentially Texas could be a swing state, or are you still seeing it's still solid Republican roots, and that's still what happened in the presidential election this year, when it's getting a lot closer, is an apparition? Or how do you feel the political scene is right now in Texas?
Well, it's still going to be a pretty, I would say, in most instances, it would be a fairly conservative state. Out of the entire congressional delegation, the 36 congressional representatives that come from the state of Texas, the majority of those delegates are for the delegation for Texas's delegation in the Congress are going to be Republican, and like a very small handful are going to be Democrats. So there is going to be more conservative voters, but I do think probably within like the next maybe 10 or so years, you might see the state will probably start shifting in a more noticeably liberal direction. I mean, in this previous election for the general in 2016, it was actually not. Donald Trump didn't really win as big as you would think in Texas. He only won, I think it was like 54% of the vote in Texas, 55% at most. I think it wasn't really all that impressive of a margin. I would have expected him to carry at least 65% of the state, which is about average because of the racial composite of the state, because a third is going to vote for Democrats, and then most of them are going to vote for Republicans. But I do think that does shed some light future of the state.
Why do you think that happened during this election? Do you feel it was because of Donald Trump's stance on the border fence, his comments about Mexicans specifically, or do you feel that this was a natural occurring feature where younger Texans are becoming they're gravitating more to the left, or why do you think it happened in this cycle? Because even during President Obama's two terms, you didn't see Texas being anywhere near this close, and Hillary Clinton wasn't exactly that popular of a politician, especially in somewhere like Texas. So, do you think another Democrat who had higher favorabilities, like Bernie Sanders, could have possibly brought the margin to within 2 or 3 points in the state of Texas?
It's tough to say because in the state of Texas, you know, I think when it came to Donald Trump, one of the biggest reasons why he didn't necessarily win as big as he should have won in Texas, I think it's because Donald Trump is not necessarily um, he's not really a traditional Republican, and he's not of the mold of Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan. He's not really of that mold, and I think that Texas voters, I think for this election, and I think that they expect a certain Republican, and they didn't really see that within Donald Trump. And that's why the state margins were not as high as they should have been for Trump. And I also think that the demographics also do play a role in this. I think that in general the demographics, the racial and ethnic and age demos they are changing. Texas is a changing state, and it's happening slowly, but it is happening if you know where to look, if you know what areas in government to really look at.
What areas do you think those are? You talking about the state legislature or Congress?
Uh, if you look at the county level governments, and you look at like certain legislation that passes, or certain legislation that doesn't pass. I think that in the most recent legislative session for the state of Texas, there was really a lot of regressive legislation that was proposed by the Republicans in the state house, and it was thought that at least one of the pieces of legislation that was being proposed would have passed, but none of them did, which I think that goes to show that the state house, like the politicians within the legislature, are starting to see a sea change within their own districts.
And actually, what brings something up as well. And a couple of years ago, Texas was trying to pass educational legislation, which stated that Jesus Christ was one of the founding fathers of the United States. Has there been any changes in that, or any back off, or just retracting that from education as a young person who was educated in Texas? Are you fearful of the state is moving away from actual education and going into what many people would see as just basically church in public schools?
I am in some ways concerned with that. Texas is very conservative, and the legislature is, at times trying to impose a conservative bent to what students learn in schools. For instance, I think I believe, if I remember correctly, Texas, they have legislation which states that that creationism has to be taught alongside, which is just that's nonsense. Creationism is, let's be honest, it's bullshit. It's not science, and I think that there is like there are certain elements within the state that want to push. There's a very sizable segment of the population that wants to put this into the schools, and then I think that there is also a strong vocal minority that is starting to rise against this regressive crap that they want to put in schools.
And because I guess to be fair to the other side of that argument is like they're saying that this is how they feel education should be done, and their values should be installed within the education system. But the fact is that separation between church and state means you can't bring any type of religious studies and say that creationism would be indeed real into a public classroom. And I believe there have been groups who have been trying to use the Constitution to basically say that this is an illegal act. So as far as you know, and I probably should look into the issue myself, but as far as you know, has any of this law changed within recent years, or are they basically still going to public schools seeing creationism being taught as a science?
I don't think that anything has necessarily changed, but I mean, when I took biology in high school, you know, they tried to keep as much of the creationist nonsense out. I mean, by law, they have to say there are some who believe. I think they have to say something to that effect. They have to say, well, some believe this, but others believe this. And that's more or less what, they kept it down to whenever I went to school. And I do think that that it still is something that exists within government, which is still within the education laws of the state. I do think it's still there. But I think that a lot of I think the better school districts in the state are trying to cut out the state's religious agenda from their courses.
And as moving forward, as a young person in this country, where do you see the future going, especially now that we are, as you stated earlier, in an unprecedented state with President Trump, who is mostly known for being a reality TV show host, is again the president. Do you feel that this is going to have a major effect on the way politics are perceived? Do you feel that this is going to cause an insurgent movement on the left that sees progressive values raised forward? Or how do you see the right reacting to this over a long period of time? What do you see in the country's future?
More than anything, I think that we're going to see the game of politics and how you run for president. They are forever changed. Donald Trump has proven that you don't have to do the standard PAC formula to become the president of the United States. I mean, let's not even talk about the countless, the many things that he said, the controversial things that he said that would have sunk literally any other person running for president. And the people don't care. The people, it goes to show that the people are to a point where they don't care. They care about someone who is speaking to the issues, and disagree with Trump on his politics, but when it comes to his rhetoric, he was speaking to the issues that a lot of voters wanted to hear. And Hillary Clinton wasn't. She was doing the standard, oh, I'm a run-of-the-mill Democrat politician running for president, vote for me, and then that doesn't work anymore. People don't want that. People know that they're being sold a load of bullshit before you even open your mouth. They know that you're bullshitting them. They know that you're not going to do anything that you say that you promise you're going to do. And and then they see Trump and they're saying, well, you know what? He's at least talking about the issues. and at least someone has the nerve to talk about these issues. And I think that forever is going to change the way that people run for president. It's going to be, the whole, personal, these controversial statements. I think that they are forever going to be irrelevancies in the future.
You do make a valid point that with a populist appeal, that's kind of how Bernie Sanders on the left rose up in the polls extremely quick and was mostly ignored by the mainstream media, unfortunately, because he doesn't do as well. He also doesn't appeal to from pundits who are political consultants working on campaigns with try to change everything about Bernie Sanders, because he just doesn't do as John F. Kennedy would do, or basically in that standard way. But when people are looking at his administration, Donald Trump's administration, and seeing it's filled full of Goldman Sachs employees and oil employees, or these big CEOs who are billionaires, and if he does install these policies that are basically like, wait a minute, you haven't changed anything, you just lied to us all, which it's looking like he's going to do if you take a look at what his cabinet's going to round up to be like. Do you feel that will change the way people see it? Because it's not like he is the most forthright person in the world.
For some, it might change. I think there will be some people who change their views and opinions on Donald Trump who previously supported him. But when it comes to when it comes to politics in general, I think that we have approached a point where you cannot run a candidate who says that they're going to run on the status quo. And that's what Hillary did. She said, vote for me, I'm running on the status quo. Well, I'm sorry to say this, but people don't like the status quo. Have been living the status quo for 8 years. They don't like it, and they want something different. And you can't promise more of the same, because at that point, why even have elections? And that's what I think a lot of voters are feeling. And that's what I think they're going to feel with Donald Trump for the next 8 years, because they've had 8 years of Obama, and they're going to feel like, well, I've had 8 years of Obama and nothing's changed. So why not have 8 years of Trump, and let's see, maybe something will happen. Maybe something will actually change.
Well, his re-election bid is going to be interesting, to say the least, because of what possibly could come out of it, who could be running against them. There definitely will be an opportunity for the Democrats to take back the White House. But even with you mentioning all that, his favorability is so low, he still lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton by nearly 3 million. And I think that's important to point out, is that even with all her faults in her campaign, the way it was ran, she basically ran in a personality campaign saying, look at what Trump has said, which was a mistake, because that didn't cost him in the primary. It never showed up in the polls as hurting him. Sometimes he actually went up in the polls after he said something most would see as ridiculous. So I do feel there's a lot that is changing right now with the political landscape, and the next 2 years are going to dictate a lot going forward. And what do you yourself, how do you feel the millennials, especially the younger millennials near the 18 to 23 range, are going to be affected? Do you feel that the economy is ever going to speed up so they can receive better paying jobs, or fair paying jobs, or not, or be able to be active in the housing market, or all these type of things that are basically our parents had? Do you feel that millennials are going to have a chance to enjoy before they're in their 40s?
I don't necessarily think that will be something that improves. Sadly to say, I think that there really is no political will to address the problems that young people are facing. Like, the fact that such a high percentage of college graduates who exit, university, they're not finding work. people who buy a house, they can't because they're racked with student loan debt because they can't get a job to pay off their debt, and they can't get a job to get a mortgage from the bank for a house. So it's something that I don't necessarily think that is going to change anytime soon. I think that we're going to get fucked over even more. Uh, I'm personally looking to other avenues. Like me personally, I am looking to leave the U.S. and pursue adventures elsewhere to see if I can pursue uh, you know hopes and aspirations elsewhere where I know that I'm not going to go bankrupt just trying to get an education or um, trying to set myself up and become a productive member of society.
And before we wrap up, what are some of your your biggest personal concerns? And is there anything else you would like to address to anyone that listens?
One of my personal concerns is I think that this is a big concern that I think that doesn't get enough attention. And I think that people on the left side of the spectrum, I think that in some cases they too invested in an echo chamber. I think that we isolate ourselves from other opinions, and I think that of a really healthy debate about the ideas and to really have a healthy political discourse in this country, I think that we have to be willing to go out and debate ideas. Yeah, an idea may be incredibly stupid, and it may be something that um, doesn't have a lot of evidence to support it. But if you don't debate the ideas, then the people who are unaware, who are uninformed, are going to come away thinking that the bad ideas being proposed are good ideas, because there's no counter to the narrative. So you have to be willing to invest your time and energy into debating bad ideas and ideas that are ultimately not helpful to society.
That is a great point, and that's a perfect point to end on, because if you have knowledge, you should not be afraid to debate an idea. That's what politics is supposed to be, debating ideas. That's when, if someone throws insults at you, that's when you know they can't defend their opinion, or that's when violence comes in. You're too afraid to actually debate your opinion. So yeah, if someone's going to throw out a wild claim, debate it with facts and knowledge, and you will show to those listening who have a logical mind that yes, that what they just said was nonsense. So I think that's a great point to end on, and I appreciate you talking with me, and we should definitely do this again in the future.
Oh, definitely. And just a minor point, just to end on, I know this is something that a lot of people don't understand, but also remember when you are debating that the goal isn't always necessarily to convince the other person. It's to convince the passerbys, the people who are the audience. That's important.
Yeah, that is also a great point. And again, thank you, and we will definitely talk again.